One question that just came to mind, right, is, and I think especially from this conversation about the company, the customer, right, you don't ever want to have a brand and a customer in an adversarial situation. But at the same time, you need to ensure that if the customer is not right here, that you manage to effectively handle that, right? So maybe just trying to understand, like, there is always this adage that no, the customer is always right. If we lose the business right now, we are giving up on LTV. So let's take this hit and focus on the next delivery. But there is probably going to a point of time, and maybe probabilistically so, where you decide that, hey, it's not worth it anymore, right? I think even understanding that, there is a point beyond which the brand needs to maybe stop. The brand needs to understand, right, that this is a hole that we're getting into, as opposed to a mine that we're looking to harvest from continuously. Just maybe tell us a little bit about how you make these trade-offs, right, of deciding when you drop a customer and say, hey, I'm not going to service you anymore because I'm very, very sure that you're the person who's wrong here, and this has been happening for a while. How
Yeah,
does a brand make that
actually,
choice?
as you were speaking, it connects back to what the thread that I lost, right? When I said that we were getting a lot of bad returns. One of the reasons we identified was that we had a 30-day no questions asked return policy. So now that is what Myntra's policy was till maybe about 2 years back, if I'm not mistaken. And now that policy is actually fundamentally changed. So if you actually go to the website, you will find that they no longer promise 30 days hassle free returns. So that is the kind of change which you will make. And that is actually pointing towards what you just spoke about, right? Which is not a particular person, but at an overall level, customers have been used to, like for almost a decade, they've been used to 30 days hassle free returns. And then you're deciding to make the experience poorer for everybody by saying, I will not do it. But those are some strategic calls you do take, right? You're like that cost which is happening because of the returns which are happening, say, beyond 10 days or beyond 12 days, almost always is used in bad returns. Then you're like, the customer is taking this policy for a ride. They're taking the company for a ride. They're like, I will use this 30 days hassle free policy to actually use the products and give it back, right? At a policy level or at a more overall level as well, you need to make these choices. I think it does come down to whether um, there is benefit to that cost which you're incurring, right? And the assessment which we made at that point was that the benefit is not sufficient, which is that this customer, I will probably lose them because there is no 30-day return, that conversion may drop or that retention may drop. But what I'm losing in terms of cogs in the products that are going to waste, which I cannot use again, is that the cost benefit just doesn't work, right? And it is sort of that cost benefit which you have to apply at a customer level as well. It is not an overarching theme to say all customers will give you an average LTV. That's the point here, right? Every customer gives you their own LTV, and it's not just about LTV, it's about the profit they generate for you. Now if over time you find that a customer is buying a lot, so they're giving you a lot of top line, but they're actually consuming a lot more, and it's detrimental for me to service this customer, then you start adding checks and balances, right? So a few things which you do is, you don't start by blacklisting a customer for behavior unless it is continuous fraud, that they're returning the products, they're returning fake Nikes, for example, right? They ordered real Nikes, returned fake Nikes. Those are customer behaviors which you would directly penalize by saying blacklisting. But usually you will follow a few steps, right? First is you will introduce a certain fee for those behaviors. Now if a customer is very prone to returning and they're actually buying 10 products and keeping one, then you start adding a delivery fee or a platform fee for them. You start adding return fees for them. So you start by some penalization for the behaviors that you find are not right, and then you move on and go down the path to then the final step of, say, blacklisting a customer because they really are not right for you to serve. Now the other flip side to it is managing backlash, right? And in a lot of these cases there are situations where you're like, I know I'm right and the customer is wrong, and but they then go on to social media with their own stories and then talk about how the company has defrauded them, right? That's nuanced. It is about how well your customer experience team or the customer complaint team is trained to answer these questions. I think the first thing is basically removing it from the public scrutiny, which is how do you calm the customer down and tell them that let's take this one on one, let's not talk about this in a public forum, and then figuring out how to resolve this issue, right? And in a lot of cases, um, there is a lot of miscommunication. I think in 90% of the cases, even the customers are not malicious. It's more that they have not understood why something has not happened. So dealing with it correctly usually resolves the issue. There are 10% cases where honestly the customer is just out to get you, right? And as and Rohit, like you said, it's not that the customer is always king. There are people out there who are doing these things, right? And in that situation, you either capitulate or threaten legal action, and then resolve it. So in some cases you just capitulate, right? You're like, I know I'm right, but I know that you are going to create this problem, so I'm just going to take this as a cost and move on. So I hope that answers the question.
No, I think that answers it brilliantly. And I was just reflecting on your point about friction, right? Look, like, for example, Amazon makes it really, really hard to connect with anybody in the customer success team to process a return, to do anything, right? I remember I ordered something by mistake and there was just no way to give it back. And sure, in a way and form, it sucked. It wasn't great that I couldn't return something that I had ordered. But candidly, the fault was mine, right? Because I made a wrong selection when I ordered something. It was book A, I ordered book B. Maybe some of these things, right? Like knowing that, hey, if you make this mistake, the platform will not compensate you. It will not support you. And I don't think they did that on day one. I mean, when I started using Amazon, it wasn't like this. They would just do whatever, etc., etc. But over a period of time, as you said, they started adding some of these penalties. They started deliberately increasing friction in specific places. Maybe Himanshu, that also adds to your point in some ways, to drive the customer behavior, in a certain manner, to ease the operational overhead and burden, and to sort of put the onus back on the customer that, hey, we told you, you knew that this would happen, so now you can't come and complain to us about it, right? It also makes it really hard for me to go and rage about this on social media, because the response is simply, hey, you ordered the wrong thing, it's your problem.
Exactly.
Right? Which makes me look really silly if I want to go and rage about it.
Exactly, right? Again, it comes down to the promise. Is like, if your promise includes a 30-day hassle-free return, then yeah, you better do the 30-day hassle-free return. But if your promise is clearly stated on the product page saying it's non-returnable, then that is the right customer experience, right? Just because I want the moon does not mean that I get it. It is what I have promised that you will get. I can say that I want this Louis Vuitton bag for 1,000 rupees. No one's gonna give it to me, right? So, yeah.